All right. Um, Hello everyone. I did a test run of this back at midnight. Today it's 4:30 a.m. I'm so sorry. It's 4:30 a.m. I did a test run of this at midnight. It took me about 50 minutes for my first run, so we've got a lot of ground to cover and not a lot of time to do it, so we're gonna get like right into it. I'm running on no sleep over the last successive 14 days, especially today, 2.5 hours, so forgive me if I like mess up or jumble or trip over words. So my name is Megan Miller. This is my capstone presentation, and I thought I had the window selected. I have my morning mocha with me. It's how I'm going to survive. So what you know is that I had a capstone project called Crosslate, which was my glove that had flex sensors and a gyrometer and accelerometer, and it would read your hand uh, with sensor values every so often in like snapshots over a second, and then try to predictively pipe out an ASCII value according to what it read and send it over Bluetooth. And I was going to train this model using TensorFlow Lite, which I think they renamed to something. I don't remember what it was, but anyway. Um, so what you don't know is that that failed shortly after our presentation. I kept running into problems where the soldering wick or the soldering um, joints of the wires would be kind of like pop tabs where after I soldered it, it got brittle, and as I was moving, the wires were bending back and forth, and eventually it just snapped off. But the uh, the finishing blow for it being my capstone project was actually a flex sensor. When I was adjusting everything on a finger, my pointer finger, um, you're gonna see my cats. I'm sorry, they're very active. the I was ripping off the electrical tape and it took off the top shell of the flex sensor, and I thought, well, that shouldn't matter. It's just a little tiny resistive band inside of that protective shell. It should still output proper values. I hooked it up to my laptop and I was bending it and trying to get any sort of reading, but it was erratic data. It was not changing values according to bend, so it effectively broke, and I went to go try to buy one from Adafruit, and they had notified on the website that it was a 3-week back order. And I panically emailed there and see for, well, what the heck do I do from here? That's a significant amount of my remaining time, and there's no promise I can even get anything to show for it after the fact. And so he suggests I change to something I called Project Zen. And I've mentioned it to him a couple of times, and I agreed. That's probably my best play, despite, as you can see here, March 7th, so halfway through the semester, and I had to change gears, and he wasn't going to go easy on me. He expected the same amount of work still, 150 hours or some such, because he hates me. I love it. So what is Zen? Zen is it's a simulated ecosystem, a simulated environment, and what it's going to do is allow me to test out various things endlessly. It's a project that never ends for me personally. I can always add something to it. Um, whether it's new species or new biomes or new features about specific like I can always add some sort of event or some sort of entity or some sort of feature to Zen. There is no end goal for Zen for me. And coding, oddly enough, can bring me calm. I tend to be a very high anxiety person, but more importantly, watching Zen was going to be more calming for me. So um, I struggle with if you want to read into it, hyperdeterminism, where once you get kind of down the rabbit hole of math and computer science, everything just, you use a tool and everything looks like the solution to that tool. Well, now I just see everything as like a predictive model of in mathematical sense and in the real world. And sometimes it gets like really stressful for me that like, you know, anyway, well, I thought, let's do a chaos theory sort of experiment where a small change can cascade into a large variation given enough time. And I wanted to make a simulated ecosystem that I can't predict because there's just so many things going on that to get a state and know what everything in it is wanting to do is just impossible for me. It's not a game. It's just something that you watch. There's camera movement where you can move the camera left, right, up, down a little bit. It's semi-randomly generated or procedurally. I don't use noise. Thought about it. I just don't know where I would want to use it. I like noise within reason, but I couldn't find a application that best fit anything here. So I just skipped it. My timetable there is down at the bottom if you haven't read it already. That's my goalpost after I sent that email to Darren Seifert, roughly a week between every major goalpost. Um, you'll learn that did not even come close to happening, but we'll see what I got. So the world gen's done through cellular automata. People who aren't familiar with it, it's like the Conway's Game of Life. Blocks and cells adhere to rules, and dirt here is going to go down until it can't, and then it's going to look down left or down right, and it will always favor to go down until it, and once it does that, it's going to attempt to go down again, and it just repeats this until it can no longer go down. It'll check down left, it can't go down left, it'll check down right, it can't go down right, now it's settled. Clay does something pretty simple, it just falls down, and then if the two neighbors, it's hard to see with the hue, but this is the dirt pixel that I use for my program. If it falls down and both are dirt, change all three to clay. In hindsight, I would have probably made it so that, like, let's say one neighbor is clay and one is dirt, it would still turn the other dirt neighbor to clay, but I totally didn't think about that until my first attempt of recording this video. It's not in it. The rules must be both side neighbors are dirt. All three become clay, and that's my clay patty to like densify patties of clay to help retain water. And you'll see when we get into the program, we're 7 minutes in. Stone just drops down. That's it, settles. My hope with stone was it was going to help create variation and elevation, and in a way it kind of does. I think I need to play with some ratios and how I'm placing things a little bit more to get some fun, like knolls and hills, um, maybe, but I had a very short timetable, so forgive me. Rollgen concepts is I have no drawn tiles. There's no tile map that I used Paint.net or Paint or GIMP or anything. Everything's pixel placed, and then I generate a tile map based on the surface, the rendering context that had the pixels placed. And I create a unique tile map based on that. So it's semi-generated, randomly generated. The worlds will look similar, but I'd be hard pressed to see that a tile map will identically match someone else's. I use several techniques during world generation. So for the terrain, what I do is I just use C++11's like random generator along with their what is it, like just their standard normal, not normal, but like uniform distribution. And then I do that in varying tiers. And what I can do is I can set like roughly how tall in pixels do I want, how how many tall in the world of worth of pixels do I want to place, the ratio of each pixel I want to put in this giant vector, because the world is 10,000 pixels wide by 1200 pixels tall, and we break it up into tiles, which is an 8 by 8 pixel chunk, so that's a lot of pixels, even for something like 20 pixels tall. Lake bed, well, after I place the terrain, what I do is I place the mountain, and that's just pure stone. I use a drunken walk, and what that is it wants to favor. I think I said it so that it's like a 50-50 shot of walking to the right and to the down, but if it walks one or the other, it skews to favor the next direction. And it kind of creates this fun, like jagged, tapered peak. Um, and then I place like a sinusoidal wave for the peaks for like the jagged spire of a mountain. Eventually down the road, I want to have snow accumulate on it, and so it looks like the traditional like snow-capped mountain. After the mountain's placed, I take the location of where the mountain met the terrain. That's my river start X and river start Y. And then I just do something called a stepping ladder where it really is just a gradient of Y coordinate that's slightly elevated above sea level. and approaches sea level again as it gets close to the future lake destination. So I calculate how long the river should be, and I just gradient along that. And then I generate my lake at the bed of the river, and that's ovoid with a normal distribution so that the clay, I just pick a center, go slightly down, calculate an oval, take all the pixels out of that and just remove them, throw them away, make them all empty so that it looks like a hole in the ground. And then after that, I take a normal distribution like a bell curve and I kind of randomly assortedly place clay so that there's a high density at the bottom and then some along the walls. And that's important because pixels matter for how water and temperature and stuff matters. The pixel contents of a tile matter. Um, So the world size is 1200 by 10,000 pixels, as I mentioned. I work with the data before I do any pixel manipulation, so I'm just doing an array of enumerated values and I'm making them adhere to the rules of the cellular automata. I convert that into pixel values after it's fully placed, and I did two techniques originally. SDL render draw point along with SDL render set color or set render draw color. Um, I wasn't calling SDL a init up until like 2 weeks ago, and I only did that because SDL started crashing on me because I forgot that I have to initiate the subsystems. Um, for those who don't know, SDL is like a framework for, it's not an engine, it's got event like for keyboards and mouse and touch screens and tilt and all the different things that you can interact with a program on a physical level for a user. It's got a timing, it's got threading, it's got basic file input output, it's got a windowing technique. You can even set up a OpenGL rendering context, but it doesn't have OpenGL like a lot of OpenGL functions, so you still have to tie in an OpenGL library to get it to do much like glue or something or GLFW. But it can create the context to present the screen to you. Then there's sister libraries for like SDL image, which lets you load a lot more image formats, SDL for fonts, SDL for internet, um, SDL mixer for sound. But those are all separate DLLs, but they can all be picked and chose. Anyway, I didn't call SDL init, which did not give me hardware acceleration, so I was drawing to software, which caused me to have this problem where RAM was like 1.7 gigs after I generated this giant world, and I did not like that. I was rather flipped. So I switched over to doing pixel manipulation with STL map RGBA. It's a lot quicker to place pixels, but it's one dimensional array, so you have to calculate the Y, the the row with something called the pitch, and you can calculate the pitch of a surface once you've generated that surface or loaded the surface, depending on how you're doing it. You have to set that yourself. Um, so here's the world, and I apologize for the magenta color. It's what I used for the transparency. It's commonly used in old-fashioned games. Um, I didn't work with like a PNG with native alpha. I just worked with a bitmap. But that's the entire world. There's a little bit more off screen that you can't see, but it's a very long world, very huge world. Most of the fun features are on the far left side, but it gave me a lot of room with the right to add additional biomes if I wanted to create like a sand pixel type or like a mud pixel type for swamps or something like that. I've got room to grow. This wasn't satisfactory though. I wanted tiles because there's a lot of wasted space. The mountain has a lot of, if you broke this up into 8 by 8, there's a lot of duplicate stone along the bottom because the bottom is solid stone. One full tile's worth of solid stone to trap the water. There's a lot of duplicates. This pink, there's a lot of duplicates, so I needed to break the world up into tile map and generate a tile map, and that's what you see here. This is a tile map. This is pretty much what you saw there, just broken up, and then I hash the values of the pixels that I'm counting in each tile. I'm concatenating that into a string if it exists. We call that as an image ID. Refer the tile that I'm currently looking at on screen to that ID, save that in a CSV. If it doesn't exist, great, we're going to save that in a unordered map with a hash and go along our way, and also refer to that in the CSV. So I'm generating a CSV as I'm pulling this um, tile map, and the CSV is how to load the world back up from this tile map using image ID. I'm using about 30% of my possible 65,000 some odd tiles. I think this was like 17,800 or something like that. So I've got a lot of room for, like, again, if I add more pixel types and more biomes, it can grow still. So next, I added water, and water also kind of fundamentally sort of works on a cellular automata with a caveat that I consider a tile's permeability and and saturation levels. And permeability is calculated based on each pixel inside that one tile, and there's 64 pixels in that tile because it's 8 by 8. So if I count the stone, what this is only calculated during world gen. In the CSV, it's loaded back up as the tile's properties. Um, but as I'm generating the world and the tile map, in the CSV, I'm counting the stone pixels, and that contributes both 0 to permeability and max saturation. Clay pixels contribute to 25 permeability and 100 minus that for its max saturation for 75 total. Dirt is similar, 65 permeability, 100 minus that, or 35 for max saturation. So dirt doesn't hold a lot of water, but it lets it trickle down a lot quicker. Clay doesn't absorb really quick, but it holds on like nobody's business. And stone just doesn't let anything through, or it contributes very little if like the tile is partial stone. Um, the water, I've wanted simplicity to kind of reign king, but try to see if I can create a complex world within the confines of a simplistic system. Gravity is king, water will flow downwards no matter the saturation of the tile below it if it can. Um, Keep in mind though, a tile's permeability determines how likely it is to share water on a tick. So like the tile itself, if it's assuming a perfect air tile, there's no pixels, it's up to 10,000, which is like 154 divided, or 10,000 divided by 64 is 154. But what I'm gonna do is take that sum, that's the tile's whole entire permeability, whole entire max saturation, and then it also has a saturation level. And it can never pass the threshold of the max saturation. And so the tile itself is going to have a percentage chance of what it'll share. Now it attempts to share 3 times, so it does do a check 3 times, down, left, right, or right, left, I don't know, whatever. And the percentage is the permeability total divided by 10,000, which is the absolute maximum, assuming it's air, and that's the probability it's going to share. And then when it does share, it looks at the neighbor's permeability, and the permeability of that is going to be a ratioed quantity of water that will be shared from the attempt from the self tile itself. So if I'm going to share 300 units of water with my neighbor, but my neighbor is 30% um, like permeable, I'm only going to share 200% or 100%. Yeah, 100% roughly units of water per tick or something. That's an exasperated amount. It works a lot smaller. Keep in mind also during my demonstration, I removed delta for the sake of making things move along so we can see some stuff happen. Again, this wants to work in real time, or I want it to work in real time, but delta per tick has been removed so things move at a lot quicker rate. Also important, water must be conserved. When I place water, that is the water in the world. It never leaves, it never gains, it just changes shape and form. And I have run checks on this to make sure like all along, and I've never had a crash you'll see in my code. For temperature and humidity, I use something like a pseudo-Laplacian, and Laplacian is where you look at your 4 neighbors and you sum up the difference between yourself and that neighbor. Um, and then you divide it by, how many valid neighbors you had. So like 4 if there was all 4 neighbors. But I also skew how much I care about a neighbor. So like so like for temperature and humidity, I care about the top neighbor more, so I give it a higher weight. And so I consider its temperature a lot more, or maybe it was the down one. Down one because it wants to rise. I don't, brain fried. Anyway, so that's the rough idea of temperatures is I'm just using the pseudo-Laplacian. Time is real time. It is May 9th at 4:51 in a Zen world if I loaded it up. I used North Dakota's latitude at 47 to kind of calculate this, to calculate a lot of things like the sun movement, the moon movement, and the average temperatures for the day of the year. Daily highs climb towards the summer solstice, so like the hottest day will be at noon, or I suppose sun peak, as I call it, on the summer solstice, and then it'll get colder towards like January and December. The highs for the day. Um, I'm just doing a simple sinusoidal. Eventually, I kind of want to do like a Fourier series where there's a little bit more peaks and valleys so that like highs and lows aren't so. It's very easily like counting or growing up and then going back down. So like, and we have like an 85-degree high today, but then next week we're having like a 40-degree high. So I wanted to get closer to that. I just had a time constraint. A lot to do, not a lot of time. The concept's there though, right? Humidity follows a very similar rule, but except water is still 1 to 1. 1 unit of water is evaporated from from the surface tiles and converted into 1 unit of humidity, and humidity caps out at around 100 tiles for air instead of 10,000 like it does in the lake. You saw that there was 10,000 max saturation for an air tile. Well, that calculates how much actual drops of water or liquid water it can hold. Well, I don't want to have that same amount up in the sky to do anything fun. We have to do a lesser value, and it's more voluminous, like clouds. So I capped it to 100. So a tile up in the air can only hold 100 saturation, but I call it humidity, and that helps me play with clouds. Um, uh, oh, I don't know. Capillary action was said somewhere, I think. Capillary action, the temperature is actually going to cause the surface tiles. I just apply the daily sun heat to the surface tiles and it spreads and radiates out. And as it gets warmer, it wants to pull up moisture back up into the world, and then I can evaporate it from there. I did a lot of research on like how a water cycle works and how mountains look for this. I kid you not, I'm not trying to brag, Darren. There's like 200 hours put on this, but it's a lot of reading and like I wanted to try to replicate stuff, but again, as simple as possible. Oh, we're on to the code part. Okay, cool. We're making great time. No. So this is Project Zen, and what I do is I start with Garden Generator. Well, technically, I start with Garden, which is the world itself, and I check to see if the world exists, and if it doesn't, I load it through the CSV and I generate my tiles. If it doesn't exist, I call Garden Generator, and that's where we kind of place our tiles. This is where I'm working with the pixel datas, which is just an enumerated value. I assign them a color during the part where I'm actually modifying a surface. There's that map RGBA, but when I'm working with, like, say, generate place terrain, I'm working with something I call cells, which is just a 2D vector or a 2D array of enumerated values, and I'm just assigning the enumerated value a pixel type enumeration. Um, Let me see if I can get some light better in on here. There we go. Um, I don't want to sit on this too long because we're running pretty late already. But yeah, I generate kind of within random confines of a size. I define a size and then I give it a little bit of flex and play a random size adjustment, either plus or minus a certain percentage. Um, and right now the mountain always spawns on the left side of the screen, and then the river at the bed of the mountain, and then a lake at that. But eventually I want the mountain to be kind of random location, and then does it pick a random side where the river starts? And can there be more than one mountain? I haven't decided yet. Simplicity just for the sake of demonstration. To change it wouldn't be too wild, I just don't know what I want to do with it yet, but yeah. I guess I never deleted that code. I tried to delete up and clean up a lot. Anyway, after I place the garden, then I'm going to place the water, which is water system. Um, and this is only ever called once. This is called, if I couldn't find the world.zen CSV file, it's going to place a random amount of water, relative percent, and I think I did 60, and then we're going to add plus or minus 15%, so like down to 85% or 15%, 115%. Add 15% to that 60% or take away 15% from that 60%, and we're going to apply that to all terrain tiles to fill them up somewhat. And then after that, I fill the lake. I look where the lake starts, where the lake ends. I put in a square and I fill them all the way up. They're going to be pumped full of max saturation. Once we get into that, the garden starts to run its updates. And I'm sure you've seen an update while it's running. Calculate the time, do input, update, render. Um, I have a debug so I can see my tick time. And, I've got all the different dirty, ugly, horrible looking functions for like how it will function um, for rendering and updating. So after that, let's look into world render, which is kind of like the doing the brunt work for the rendering. Eventually, each system, like plants and animals, will have their own rendering system, but I don't have any of those, so it's really just things in the world like clouds, terrain, and debug views for the terrain. I'll show you that. World render, CPP. I do a lot of lerping for debugs. I'll show you what I mean. The moon, I flip the image. I have 4 or 5 images for the moon, so it's new moon, crescent, quarter, gibbous, and then full moon. And then if it's, crescent, gibbous, or quarter, I just flip it depending if it's waxing or waning on a horizontal level. And I do calculate the moon's percentage, so I think it's a full moon today, and I think it should be a full moon if we run this. Let's do a quick run because there's a lot, and I'm already at 25 minutes, and I'm sorry guys, there's a lot, and Darren wanted me to do more, so you're gonna see some things. So we're generating in the background, it's telling me what it's doing. Oh, it's still a gibbous. I think tomorrow is. Anyway, so this is the world. This is the mountain waters kind of up on top, and it will eventually flow down according to the rules of the water. It's just when we're working in water quantities of 6,000 to 10,000, which if I click this, it'll tell me how much water it has. It's 328. Okay, well, it will slowly trickle down. It's just got to wait for the neighbors to get less saturated. And then this kind of like divot right here is like a basin. It kind of curves in and it'll hold some water as it's flowing in, and that will help feed this river, which if you see the blue streaks are water. Eventually this does settle and it looks a lot cleaner. I'll take a picture and I will put it at the end of this video or something to show you. But if I press T, you're going to see a temperature map. Now this happened gradually. Um, I'll close it. It's got to save the world because I'm saving it. Um, and then if I run it again and I press T, you're going to see that it's going to heat up the surface first and it's going to gradually radiate upwards. And that's how it was before. It's just I took so long that it kind of normalized or neutralized all of the temperature. You can see a little bit of clouds. I made it so that if a tile's humidity is 80% or 80 or higher, it generates a cloud image, and the cloud is kind of like gradually put in. So as you would expect, right above large bodies of water, you're going to see clouds. Oh, and this black square is wind. This black square that you see moving across the screen, that's my debug view for the wind vector, and it was kind of carrying some of the clouds with it. They snap back a little bit, but they do eventually get kind of shoved. Here comes another wind, right? So it's kind of like pulling it, but then it like gradually kind of like wafts back. Um, but it'll happen. Right now I have 3 wind generated. They'll move all the way to the end of the world. Every 15 seconds, one is generated up to 3 wind at a time. Once they hit the peak, they'll start all over. And if I hit H, that's my humidity map. This is a lerped colored version of the humidity in this area. So if I click and drag my mouse, which lets me debug view tiles that the mouse is pointing at, you'll see this orange is low humidity, and as I move up, it's yellow. The teens, tens, and the deep blues are like the 90s and hundreds. And that is what I use to calculate if a cloud is going to form there. And it kind of creates this fun, awesome looking cloud function, which really, I'm not gonna lie, is actually just the moon. scaled down to a little bit bigger than the size of a tile. I think it's 12 pixels by 12 pixels, and the transparency is blended based on, or lerped based on like whether it's 80 through 100 humidity. And then I think right above here we should see a couple eventually. Yeah, they're kind of peaking because this river is starting to pool up water. It's hard to see because it's nighttime. So if I go and adjust date and time, and I say no to automatically, and I change the time, and I change this to, I don't know, say PM. Um, Perfect. It's 5 p.m. The sun is kind of cresting over the hill. Now we've got a little bit more temperature to play with. It should get a little bit hotter. That's my temperature map, and yeah, it gets cold inside the rock with negatives up to teens, and it gets really, really hot on the surface. I do scale the temperature on the surface. When I'm placing the sun's rays on the surface, it is scaled to the Y coordinate. Um, so that way the mountain stays kind of cold. Um, even during the summer solstice, this is still below freezing. So, and if you can see, there's the kind of spire spikes that I want to accumulate snow and make it look like a traditional mountain. But as you can see, there's water pooling here in the spring, and that helps feed this river. And the water is flowing, and it's feeding this lake. And this lake's already kind of starting to settle. If you notice, the water's not looking squared, it's kind of tapering off, and eventually all this water in the lines will start to swell up down here. Capillary action will keep pulling it up, but yeah. So that's my live demonstration. I think that's super cool. Let's move on to the thing. This is all on GitHub. You can watch it if you want to look more at the code. There's a lot of things I have to cover. I got a lot of things I just kind of, I don't even know if it's good. I don't even know if I'm a good programmer. Half of this is kind of cobbled together because of the time constraint, and most of this is just me bullshitting and changing a lot of values and seeing what I can't get. A lot of time was spent just fidgeting and learning about sine wave and learning about, Laplacian and learning about how to like help manage water in a giant world. Oh yeah, I probably didn't show you this, but it does go way far out there. It's just boring. There's nothing special after the lake. So if I just keep moving the camera off to the side, it'll just keep going and going. I did make it so that the home button takes you back to the left side and the end button on your keyboard goes to the far right side. So like, and we're at the far right side and home, we're back at the, anyway, that's that. Let's go back to the PowerPoint, y'all. So, my concerns or considerations with concerns was the separation of concerns. I tried really hard to not couple a lot of my Tango is chewing on a cardboard box. Um, to not couple a lot of my classes and my objects. I wanted to try to see if I couldn't make it so that they only needed any as much as they fundamentally needed, and that it's a little bit, reusable or expandable. Um, Everything on the screen or everything within the camera is rendered, but anything off the camera is always simulated. The simulations don't stop just because it's not seen. That's important to me. Water way off in the distance should still adhere to evaporation and capillary action and sinking into the ground. Clouds will still be there. They just won't be shown. So if I can eventually figure out how to do rainfall, that'll happen. Or snowfall, what have you. Simulations for like the physical aspects of the world will always be happening. It's just only rendered, whatever is in camera. And I delegated and time sliced the various systems because we have so many tiles. So like the water system, if you saw that it looked like scan lines, I'm just taking the mod 80th column and updating it. And then once I do it, I up the iterator. So it's mod 80 plus I, and the I is the iterator. So it's like 0, 80th, 160th, and then the next it's the first, 81st, 60, 161st, and so on and so on. It creates this scanline effect only if you did something that I just did, and that's not double buffer. And I would double buffer, I'm burnt out, I don't have time. It still kind of works, kind of. What did I learn? I got a deeper knowledge of C++ and SCL2. I already knew kind of both, but I did learn quite a bit. C++ 17 I used because I wanted to have static functions inside my namespace and static variables, but I didn't know that if I created a static variable in a namespace and I was invoking it outside that class, it was creating a local copy of that variable inside that class. Because I had static, like all these properties to the world in utils, and I kept saying, like, when I was trying to load the world back up from the CSV, and then I was trying to assign this send file with just a static version, this would constantly just stay 0. And it's like, okay, well, Garden gets its own copy, but utils.hpp doesn't get its own version. So I had to change it to inline, and then I changed that you have to have C++11's runtime to do some of, and it's all because of this, I believe. This and this. I don't remember why. I think it's that. Yeah. Um, and so uh, that's what I did there. That things take a lot more time than anticipated. As you saw, I came nowhere close to my timetable. I don't have plants, I don't have fauna. I have a very poor wind system. My ideal wind system is a giant chunk widthwise, and it spans the terrain to the height of the world, and it divides that in half, and it compares all the tiles in the top half, or sums up all the humidity and temperature of the tiles in the top half, and same for the bottom half. And when the difference between the two reaches a threshold, it normalizes and neutralizes, like, so everything becomes equilibrialized. And as I'm doing that, I'm counting how much I had to change every tile to get them equil to equilibrium, and that's going to help generate a gust factor, and the gust will, like, be stronger or shorter, and it'll taper off as it's traveling, so it'll peter out as it's traveling. I did not get that in, so I just got a rudimentary square that just kind of goes around, and I take the magnitude from the center of the square, and so it feathers out, like, tiles within the square are affected weakly at the sides, and then more strongly at the center by the force that I apply it, which is just a sinusoidal, like, nudge. If the tile resides within the wind gust square, apply a force, and the force is skewed based on the magnitude from the center. Um, I would have probably picked ECS instead of OOP because I'm working with a large chunk of data, 187,500 tiles, each with like 7 or 8 properties. I would have done ECS, which is a smarter play for cache misses on loading for your computer, and it would have been a lot faster. Now, most of my rendering, or most of my tick time is spent on rendering, and on that note, I would have probably gone a route of using shaders. I didn't. I don't know OpenGL that well, and SDL2 doesn't natively support shaders, so um, yeah. And what I missed, I already told you, no plants, no fauna. I didn't get forecasting on a semi-granular level, so that, like, each quarter hour of a given day, of a given week, of a given month can be saved into a CSV file, and then I can, like, LARP and build accordingly to within that snapshot of granularity. So, like, a 15-minute high and low temp, and a 15-minute wind speed or wind intensity or wind likelihood. I didn't get any precipitation, so the water evaporates and just kind of sits up there. And if you let it run long enough, the lake gets actually dropped down pretty low, the water in the lake. Um, what would I do differently? I'd get a different degree. Totally full stop, baby. I'm tired. I'm stressed. I don't know why I do the things I do, but to be honest, I love it, and I would not get a different degree. I love computer science. This is a joke slide. Let's go on to the next one. Uh, ECS mentioned that, OpenGL mentioned that, but I would combine, so I want to try to combine a lot of clouds because each tile's humidity calculates a cloud puff, which is just the circle moon that I transparent. But that gets very rendering expensive, and I want to try to find a way if I can do bigger circles depending on its neighbors. I haven't quite narrowed that down, so I couldn't get that done on time, but I did get the wind that Darren so desperately wanted me to get in on time. That's why I stayed up so late. He wanted me to get wind in. By golly, I got wind in, and I got clouds to look a lot better than how they were. Because I had it and it was going like 200 milliseconds per tick time because I was using like a particle system. I'm like, let's just draw it on the dang tile, you'll see the scan lines of the updates. I would double buffer and that would remove the scan line so I don't switch the humidity and the temperature buffer. The humidity, the saturation, and the temperature buffer until all of the tiles have had a chance to update, and then so you read the current state, but you apply updates to the next state. And once all tiles have had that chance to update, we swap the buffers, and it looks a lot more instant and less kind of like scan lines like a CRT. I would probably stick to software also instead of hardware because I'm not a hardware gal, but I like to tinker with hardware, but for homework, not practical. I do want to stick with the glove. I'll probably get that done on my own dime and time. And that's it. That's my presentation. This is 15 minutes shorter than the last one. I apologize, and thank you all for sticking through with me. GitHub's right there. You can see all the commits. I think there's some curse words. And if you have any questions, email me at megan.r.miller@ndus.edu or find me on campus. I don't know. Thank you all. Have a good day.